Day in the seventh circle, we have the game Grand Tactician, the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. And start out as we always do here with our disclaimer. The game was purchased some time ago. It is listed also in early access, so everything is subject to change. Grains of salt. It was played through using both factions. Only the single-player content will be covered in this analysis. The game was played using vanilla configuration, no mods or other add-ons or DLC. Copywritten material was used under fair use for review purposes. Now then, moving right along to the first section as it always is here, Immersion. Now, graphically, as you can see on the video on the left, the game is quite impressive. It uses some real 3D imagery to create a world for the player to inhabit, and especially that really is the party piece of this game. It's this map view that you're seeing now. How scrolling in and scrolling out significantly changes the view. There is a fair amount of customization of agency available to the player to customize units to their specific desires, changing colors, changing caps, changing things like that. The story of the game, although it is somewhat limited by the actual history, is player created. Now, audio, obviously, we aren't going to play that, but it does employ period correct audio, minus lyrics. Although this might not be recognized by all players as a period accurate audio, it does exist. Now then, stats focus. Statistically, the game throws up walls of statistics for players to pore over, to analyze, and to decipher. And that really does help to immerse the player into the game. Finally, the game adds a level of challenge to itself. And there are tactical puzzles when battles are initiated, and an overall grand strategy to pore over. This game absolutely does everything it can to immerse the player. There is nothing left out. It has absolutely earned its 15 out of 15 on that. Moving on, however, that to difficulty. Now, the game does provide some very basic options for difficulty. You can see those in the images on the right. Before the campaign starts, players are given the opportunity to select a basic level of difficulty. There's also things beneath that we really want to highlight. There's easy, medium, and hard, and then historical, and then adaptive. But the thing that really does need to be highlighted here is the realism options. Obviously, selecting different options for realism can adversely affect the difficulty of the game, and that's not necessarily spelled out. The tutorial is absolutely essential, although keep in mind this is an early access game and the tutorial might not always, well, to put it mildly, it might require multiple go-throughs to get the tutorials completed. And even then, the tutorial might be needed to be repeated to remember some of the information that's presented there. The user interface can increase some of the difficulty. You can see that from the screen again on the right, the upper one, because there's a lot of things to look at. There are icons that don't necessarily make a lot of sense to the player on the first playthrough, and although overall the icons are good, there are just some that and this is where the game really does sort of let itself down, is that there are some icons that seem to be time sensitive and missing them, or they have a very, very small area that's the on-click detection, and that can lead to units not moving or things not being accepted when they're supposed to be, and that does adversely affect difficulty. As we note here, the game does have some hidden variables, and certain unit types are where you'll notice that where players will notice that the most. And for all of this, it does earn, all told, a 6 out of 15, which is below average. On to Lasting Appeal. Lasting Appeal is a 8 out of 15 here. There are some two ways to engage with the game. These are in single player mode, of course. These are either the campaign or playing through historical battles. There are only two factions for players to choose from. Obviously, the game is very limited by history and it tries to stick to that. So don't expect the French or the Germans or the Argentinians to be joining in. There are multiple start points, and those are going to have an effect on how quickly players are able to get into action, but that can adversely affect the immersion level and how much the player is able to make that faction their own, or they might have made decisions that they wouldn't necessarily make on their own if they had been given the freedom to do that. So there are at present no DLC or mods available. Obviously, that is going to be somewhat limited by the reliance on history. And playing the game over short periods of time is not a bad idea. However, what we found over our playthrough is really the key to that immersion is how long the initial playthrough is. That if the initial playthrough is very short, then the appeal very, very quickly fades off. But if the initial playthrough were like, for example, the 1861 start date, if the player plays through that up to 1862, then they're very likely to experience a significant amount of lasting appeal. If they're just playing 5 minutes through a little battle, it's not going to be all that immersive. The time compression is very highly suggested for this game to speed it up and make things a little bit quicker and increase the lasting appeal because decisions come along quicker. Again here, as with a couple of other games that we've already talked about, interest in the particular time period being covered is going to affect appeal, or it does seem as though it's going to affect appeal. And on that point, it is helped by the fact that the particular time period is very familiar to people who reside in the United States. So then, moving on, that brings us to the final point, as it always is here, with the final analysis. Overall, the game has earned a rather surprising 9.6 out of 15. And it is a game that is quite immersive. It's thrown absolutely everything at the wall that it can, or it does seem to. And immersion, again, it does seem to be reliant on that initial time spent with the game at the start of a campaign or the battle. And finally, interest in the time period is going to affect how long and how interested in the particular game the player is. It does present the ability to alter history, which not all games of this particular genre do, and that can be very helpful to it. But as we never consider other games in the genre on this channel, we let the game stand on its own. That's where the game stands, 9.6 out of 15. So with that, that's all I've got for today. Do the YouTube things, and goodbye.